I was born in Jamaica, in the parish of Portland, the eastern end of the island, between two rivers. But it was a loving community with the extended family. The church plays a large part in the community, also the cricket club. And because of that, it was loving and caring. At the same time, there was discipline. It is a farming community, mixed farm, bananas, coconut, citrus, pigs, fowls, and spices. I went to Fair Prospect School, which is an all-age mixed school. You were taught the 3 R's, and beyond that, if your parent had money, nothing to do with your ability range, about 2% of the population went to grammar schools. Surprisingly, most of the grammar schools in the West Indies or in the colonies is after the English public school, but you have to have money. So the average man child did not get education. That's why today I'm trying to read things to educate myself even now.
What were the conditions of people's lives? Were people wealthy or poor?
People in the colonies are not wealthy. When the Romans came to Britain, the Romans came for the benefit of themselves. When the English came to Jamaica in 1655, they came for their own benefit. We were organized to produce raw material for the mother country. Also, the governor was the one who ruled the island from Westminster. The man in the street had no say relating to education, health, welfare. Our produce were decided in London, not Kingston. In short, we were producing for the mother country. We were poor.
How did the war change people's attitudes and aspirations in the West Indies, though?
Although it was a colony, when Germany invaded Europe and the tanks running all over the place, we realized after the Battle of Britain that England or Britain could not defeat Germany. And the British government asked for help from the colonies or from the empire. And we are proud to say Jamaica was the first country in the British Empire that put pennies together to buy a squadron of Spitfires. Now, the British Empire was not perfect, but we sure did not want a German empire in the West Indies, because that would be very bad. Nazism or fascist is a very bad thing. So, the war affected us.
You joined the army?
Royal Air Force, madam.
RAF, sorry about that. Can you tell me how that came about?
There were ads in the papers asking people for war material and money to fight the Germans. They also asked in the newspaper, the Daily Gleaner, for men to volunteer for the armed service. I still have some of the ads today. It stated, young men, you're needed to fight for the British Empire, to fight for the mother country. The irony of it is you also had to pass a test. So although you were 18, reasonable, you had to pass a test because war is a complicated thing. And the Royal Air Force only take the cream anyway.
What did you actually do during the war?
Well, I repaired the aircraft because although the pilots are very romantic and the fighter pilot is great, unless we repair the aircraft, he can't take off, man. It was a family. There were people from all over the Commonwealth, from the Sudan, Canada, Australia, Jamaica, the West Indies. And the people were very helpful and cooperative. I had one bad incident at RAF Dishford. A corporal came back from South Africa into our billet that night and saw me and said, "What that black man doing in the billet?" Someone said, "Well, he's been here fighting the war. Where have you been?" He said, "Black people can't stay in the same billet." He said, "Rubbish. What have you been doing? We don't know, but Sam and the other people have been fighting the war here." And apart from that, the people in general, especially in Lancashire, would invite you home for tea, etc., and they did not have much. I ended up with 2 mothers, one in the West Indies and one in Bulwell, Nottingham. So I was very fortunate. At the end of the war, I was taking a correspondence course and building maintenance. And I asked the authorities if I could stay and continue my studies. They said, no, if I marry an English girl, then I could, or if I were selected from Jamaica to a college here or educational institution, if not, I had to go back. Jamaica is a colony. During the war, a large amount of men went to Panama and worked on the canal. Thousands of men also went to America and worked on the farms and in the war industry. Over 30,000 of us volunteered for the armed service. They threw us all back to Jamaica and the West Indies after the war. It was confusion, unemployment, and young men who had seen Europe and seen freedom wanted freedom. I was not a happy man.
Can you remember where and when you first saw the advert for passage to England?
The Gleaner, which is the main newspaper, carried an article about a month before, no, about 3 weeks before the Windrush arrived. SS Empire Windrush, sailing from Kingston to England with about 400 troop deck, applied to the wharfs on such a date. Within 2 days, at the given date, I arrived. I was shocked. There was a queue of about 300 men ready to pay £28.10 to come to England. Try and remember that normally ships do not leave Jamaica for England empty. £28.10 seems small, but that was equivalent to about 3 cows. And the average man did not have 3 cows. Many people in the villages, when you said you were going to England to live, they said you can't do that, because the missionaries gave them the idea that you can't. It's only, say, middle-class students go to England and study and come home. But we, who have lived in England before, knew different. Because if I lived in England during wartime, I sure could live in England during peacetime.
Can you tell me how many people came over to England, to Britain, on the Windrush?
Officially, it is 492. I am saying 500 because I knew 8 stowaways. The irony of it is that after about a week out, one stowaway was apprehended because his collar was dirty. And we organized that he would borrow a clean shirt, wash his dirty shirt, then change over again. When we were in Bermuda, they took him off. The funny thing about it is, 2 more stowaways came on at Bermuda. One was a young fellow, about 18, very sensitive, and I was asked to go and see him. I went below deck and saw this young man in the corner, very nervous. I said, like, settle down. You're among West Indians, you're among Jamaicans. Make yourself useful when you arrive in England, give yourself up, and everything will be all right. To the best of my knowledge, he survived. We all survived.
And for that £28 and 10 shillings, did you get cabins? Where did people sleep?
Cabins? What do you think this is? Queen Mary? We were on a troop deck where hundreds of people were allotted little space with a blanket. A few people had hammocks and a few people had bunks. The background to it is the Windrush was built for the German SS, and it was very clean. When you go into the bathroom, you could see a few SS signs here and there. But the fact that it was a German boat, it was very clean, well organized. But no, you slept on the deck, and when morning arrived, you roll up your blanket and put in the corner.
And what about food? What kind of things did people eat on the journey?
It was average English egg and bacon in the morning, midday mashed potatoes. I never liked mashed potato. There were no consideration that these people were from the West Indies. At the same time, if you're in Rome, you do what the Romans did. I did not like the mashed potato, but apart from that, we were coming for employment. We're not coming about food. The main thing is to survive. And I think we did, because if you touch me, I'm still alive today.
How long did the journey take? How many days?
We started on the 24th of May 1948 and arrived in England, Tilbury, on the 22nd of June. But try and remember that we stopped in Bermuda for 3 days. Officially, the engine was bad. We felt that the authorities did not want us in England and tried to stop us, because many of the newspapers, like the Dispatch, at that time stated that these people should not land in England. And there was a pocket battleship, HMS Sheffield, on the skyline all the time. And we knew if there was the slightest disturbance, we would have sent back to Jamaica. Biblically, during the time of Claudius in Rome, all the Jews were sent back to Jerusalem. And at the back of our mind, the imperialists in London would like to send us back if we had the slightest disturbance on board. So there were no disturbance. Most of us were in our late 20s. I was 22 then. And the irony of it is, the fact that I'd been in England before, were able to encourage people to think of documentation. That is to say, you have to have food coupon before you could eat, and you have to have a document before you could get work. So I was telling people that, and I saw men at 40, 36, who have never left Jamaica before, and I was telling them, I don't think I did a good job, because some of these farmers could not understand, right, I am going to England to work. There is work. Why should I have to go and get documents to sign and backward? I tried to explain to them, well, you will not get any food unless you have a ration card.
When the boat docked, where did it land?
It landed at Tilbury on the 22nd of June. It was a grey June morning, cold in comparison to the West Indies. Some of the men had somewhere to go to. They went and disappeared. About 230 had nowhere to go, and they were collected on buses and taken to Clapham Deep Air Shelter, which used to have students and prisoners of war, Italians working in the area. And from there, they went to the Labour Exchange in Coal Harbour Lane, Brixton. And that is why today a large amount of Afro-Caribbean or West Indian peoples are in the Brixton area.
Can you tell me what the air raid shelter was like, what the facilities were like?
It was war grade, my sister. You had maybe a blanket, and you have a shelter, and there were 1 or 2 bunks, but on an average it was rough. But the immigrants did not come looking for a comfortable bed. They came looking for employment. That was the key. And within 3 days, one man we call Columbus got a job, but he had to have documentation by then. And within 3 weeks, all the people who were in the shelter had jobs, and they left the shelters. I went to Balham Labour Exchange. My friend took me from Mitcham. The nearest Labour Exchange is Balham, up Tooting, Broadway. I was offered 5 jobs. Take any one you want. I did not take any, because I had no accommodation, and my father said to me I had to stand on my own 2 feet. So I went back into the Royal Air Force for 4 years. I had the privilege, while I was still in the Royal Air Force, to apply to the Metropolitan Police. I passed the academic test and medical and went before the board. And I was a little bit disappointed because they did not give me the job. About 3 days after they sent a letter, they are very sorry. I have lived that the Commissioner of Police had invited me to encourage young blacks to join the police force. That is, say, 40 years after. But there it was. I wanted to join the police force. I passed the academic medical test, and the selection board turned me down with no answer. Today, they are begging blacks to join the said Metropolitan Police. Therefore, these youngsters do have problems, but they have never heard the half of our problem.
What did you do, and what kind of job did you get after you left the RAF?
Having left the RAF, I thought that although there were full employment in England, we will have difficulties once the cities have been rebuilt. I applied to the post office, and by the way, at that time was chiefly ex-service personnel who could get into the post office. I got into the post office, and after 33 years, I am now a retired pensioner. It was one of the best things I ever did, going into the post office. A large amount of the immigrants went into factories, offices, and all over the place building sites. But at the end of about 10 years, the situation changed. Today, if you're unemployed and you're over 55, it is very hard. The fact that I and a large amount of the immigrants at that period went into places like the buses, railway, hospitals, we had stable jobs. Most of us are now retired with a little pension. It makes a lot different, or a difference, when you're unemployed and you're 60. We did the right things. By the way, the average host nation didn't want most of those jobs like railway, etc. Today, they want them.
You think a little push, we push for you. And a little push, we push for you. You think is little clean, we clean for you. And no little clean, we clean for you. For you all mother England? No. For all of my children them. All of my children them. You think is little dirt we move for you? Huh? You think a little dirt we move for you? You think is little brick we throw for you? I know little brick we throw for you. For you all mother England? No. For me pick them. For all of me pick them.
Getting accommodation was very difficult. Although there was ads in the evening papers saying that there's a room to let, you had to go to 5 accommodation before you would get one. When I said 5 addresses, you would go to East London, Southwest London, Rotherhithe, all over the place, traveling up and down, and you would see an ad in the Evening Standard, room to let, 2 High Street, just for argument's sake, Rotherhithe. When you arrive, I'm very sorry, bang, it's gone. Next day, somebody else who were a European background would arrive and they would have it. So yes, there were prejudice, but the deciding factor, there was not a lot of accommodation. The background, those baddy Germans had bombed the British Isles. So 10% of Britain were destroyed, and the people themselves had no accommodation. And the authorities were not planning for immigrants from the colonies. That is not done, or it was never been done. So the average man in England did not have much accommodation. Once we start working, we start what we call partner. You would call it a Christmas club. At the end of each week, money would go into a kitty. And at the end of, just assume it was 30 people, at the end of 30 people, 30 weeks, it was paid out. From that, each person in the partner was encouraged to buy a property. You had to, because you could not get proper accommodation. To the best of my knowledge, in the London Borough of Southwark, by 1962, a large percentage of the black-owned properties, and my family was the second family to buy a house, 9 Sears Street in Southwark, was from the savings.
Do you think that that high proportion of black people buying property at this time had a long-term effect on British society? By that I mean that in terms of an impact on English people buying their own homes and aspiring to buying their own homes.
We brought some things to the England. For example, fast bowling is one in comparison to, say, spin bowling. But a lot of the average English would never thought of buying their own property. My friend, who lived in England all his life, born and grew here, when I said I'm going to buy a property, he said, you can't. You're an average person. Having bought the property, and make sure it was well washed and clean, especially the stairs, and he and his mother visited the place, he was so impressed. Not only that, it was full of tenants. It had to be, because the tenants or the immigrants coming had nowhere to go, and we provided a service. And from that, within the next 5 years, he also started owning properties. And that worked. When people learn that, yes, there's a black man, he has got his property. I born and grow here, they start thinking. We have helped indirectly in property ownership in England. The black community developed because once we had employment and your brother and sister in the West Indies were unemployed, within the next 2 years they start coming. From that, and I stated that we now start buying properties, so we start having the foundation. I went to Brixton to try and get red peas to buy, let's say it was about 1952. And the man laughed at me when I asked him for red peas, and he shouted to the other stallholder, this black man wants red peas, and they laughed. 5 years after, they were all selling red peas, or the equivalent, because if they did not sell it, they would not be trading. You could not vote in the West Indies because you were a colony, but if you were over 18 here, you could vote. It is true in the case of my case, once I was settled in the post office and of employment, I joined a political party. And from there, they invited me to be governors of school and later on a member of the health authority, and by accident they asked me to be go as a councillor, and from there we carried on. But that was not vital. It was not important for me. What was important was to work to ensure that my children did have a better chance in life than I had in the colonies.
What kind of social life did you have? Were there lots of places to go out to or not?
There were lots of places to go out to, but I didn't have, most of us didn't have much social life. You were free within reason to go wherever you want, but there were a few places that did not like you to come there. I myself did not have much social life because I was fortunate enough to be in the post office, and there was a good amount of overtime. Wrong or rightly, we were working overtime to help my brothers and sisters. The other people were about the same. We did not start having social lives until, I would say, a good amount of young ladies start coming in about 1960. And having looked at one young lady and I saw her, I said, well, I might as well have that one. And that was it. First time, bang, and we got married.
In the hot and shady blues, we could, for a moment, lose the memory of the blank or hostile stares, the bills that catch us unawares, the bus that moves off just too soon, the sky that seems so full of gloom. In this small, tight, sweaty room, we share our tribal greetings, share our common knowings, share the loneliness of seeking. Come dance with me. Hold me tight. Let me, this once, melt your body into mine, erect decline so fine. Tremble now for me, for only you, blues dancer, could hear my sad story.
When you were older and had children yourself, what was their experience of the education system in this country? Was it positive or negative? What kind of problems did they find with it?
In my case, a little bit unusual. My boy went to a public school, Allen's, which is a Dulwich College institution. My first girl went to a school in Jamaica, then did nursing here, and went to North Carolina University. My last girl went to Mary Datchler, which was a grammar school, and from that she went to Alexandria University, Egypt, and Urbina University, Italy. So that was one of the important things in my life. I never had a chance in school. I never did welding. I never did anything apart from the 3 R's. So I came to England hoping that my children would have a better educational background. They did. Now, the masses of the other people coming, they went to government schools. They had problems like everybody, being new. But at the end of the day, they did the best they could, or they can at that given time. I would say a large amount of the teachers did not understand the different cultural background. That created a problem, resulting that maybe 10% of our young blacks ended up in the lower ability range classes, and from that other problems. 15, 20 years ago, we stated that the difficulties that the young black Britons were facing were a cultural difference, not academic. A large amount of the educational people, the teachers thought, no, he was making noise, he wanted to play cricket, he's not interested. Resulting that problem. We realize this, we make representation to the authorities, they said, oh no, there's no racialism. At first, they had no laws relating to racism. But when it was established, they did something about it, and things have been done. Overall, we have come over that hurdle, and we do hope the third generation will have a better chance in life than the second generation.
Do you think that life now is easier or harder for young black British people?
These youngsters have never had a hard life. They don't know what it is. They live in a welfare state, and if they go about it the right way, they can get accommodation. We had to buy our accommodation. If I'd gone on the council waiting list then, I would be about 60. About now, I would get a flat. So yes, things are better for them. Sad to say, not all of them took full advantage of the educational facility. I'm a little bit sensitive about this. I never get the chance of welding when I went to an all-age school. These youngsters have all the facilities for welding, engineering, you name it. And some of them coming out of school with no skills. I cannot understand that. Take the maximum opportunity and get some education or get some knowledge. Knowledge is wisdom. To the best of my knowledge, Solomon was a man with wisdom and knowledge. And if you have knowledge, you will do well in the world. If you are not equipped with no talent, you're at the bottom of the scale, culturally, economically, you name it. Climb up the ladder.
What do you think are the most positive changes that you've seen in British society since in the time that you've...
The material wealth of the nation. Try and remember that we had ration, limited accommodation, and many of the houses had no baths, especially in the north of England. On a Friday evening, it was common to see people queuing, a queue of 20, 50 people waiting to have a bath. Today, most houses have baths, television, washing machine, and we have got too many cars on the street. So that is a slight problem. We have improved material immensely, including the black Britons or the established Afro-Caribbean people.
And what do you think are the most negative things you've seen happen over the time that you've lived here?
The attitude that we are only grumbling, we are not doing things. Instead of going out and trying to do things, we still carry on that grumbling attitude, and the youngsters especially. They are not getting up, go, learn, do something. They are blaming other people. That is slightly sad.
Out of all the time that you've lived in Britain, is there one time that you could pinpoint that you would say it felt the most threatening to be here as a black British person? When would that time be?
Late summer 1958, you have the Notting Hill riot. And it was very bad and scary. People were being attacked in the streets. Claudia Jones and a few other people from the West Indian Afro-Asian Gazette organized us in districts. Officially, I responsible for Camberwell. And you were not trained. People knew that if they had a problem, they would come to Sam in Camberwell, or they would go to Claudia in Brixton. That was a period of great worry. People were coming to me and said, should I go back to Jamaica? I said, no. If you want to go back, which a large amount of the immigrants said that they'd come for 5 years and then they would go back. If you want to go back, go back. But do not run because National Front or neo-fascists start beating you up in the streets. Because although they do not want you here, the British people are reasonable and law and order will prevail eventually. And give the authorities their due. 2 men who had beaten up some black people in Notting Hill were sent to prison. And once the authorities clamped down, things start functioning reasonable. We will always have problems, whether you're in the West Indies or England or that. But to me, for every person who has been nasty to you, there was always another person who has been very helpful. Give the British their due. They are very loving. They like animals, even if they don't like people.
If you were going to be remembered for things that you've done in your life, what would you most like to be remembered for?
Surviving as an immigrant in England. Not enough credit is given to us that, like the Mayflower that went to America and established the European institution in America, we, the Afro-Caribbeans, came on the SS Empire Windrush on the 22nd of June 1948 and survived against the establishment, against winter, against whatever it is, and we survived. The other things like making babies and having children, and it's a normal process. I went to a college when I was 62 and got a little bit of paper. To me, that was something. But no, survival, I think, was important.
And if you could make just one single change in our society, what change would you make?
A more, I don't know if the Christian attitude is the right thing, unless we have an environment where we consider the next man, our own neighbor as ourselves, with respect and dignity. Although we have racial laws and laws affecting either thither, we will always have problems. Man is selfish, and we should think about our brothers as ourselves. I would like more of that.
Sing, girl, sing. There is more to you than skin. My finger whitlow from years of cleaning corners where brush and dustpan couldn't reach. Same hand used to plait your hair with pride, oil its thickness with hopes and dreams, tie it up with ribbons of some rainbow future. My apron was a canvas. All the greases are rubbing down all your bodies and cooking plenty greens. I used to smell it before I roll it up and take it to the laundry. Smell the action of my days and the sweat of my action. Making little time for you all and your father. Making time for your little formal prayer to the heavens. For these days are fine. Every thought is a prayer. That the pot won't boil over while I run upstairs to scrub the bath. That the cooker won't start play up and the smell of gas come leaking through. that something teacher say would register and turn your brain past idleness to the honor of your work. I can feel it now, you're getting older, stepping past my little learning that you think are stupid. But I see how your father embarrass your friends with him smell of the oil from London trains. In your goings, girl, don't mind we smell, with memories of back home, with regular Sunday church in the back of the local hall. We is just what we is, watching you grow into this place. And I telling you, is your own. We don't bleed for it. You're born you, right in the shadow of Big Ben. Clock struck 1 as the waters break and you come rushing through. I don't move fast as you. It's not my duty to, and the cold does bad things to me knee. I is old tree girl, rough outside with years of breaking bark. You is new seed, bursting ground. So sing, girl, sing. There is more to you than skin. You know, I see your eye turn way every time you see me wrinkled hand. And at my age, I can't worry who I belch in front of. And I know it embarrass you when I see something in a skip and I take it out. But we is a thing drill out away from young. We had to save ourselves from a shoestring to a little leftover. And you know how I make all your tongue sweet when I turn my hand to make something special out of nothing? I'm not trying to make you feel sorry. I'm just trying to make you understand that we come as far as we can and we try to arm you with all the things that we could see that you might need. Not trying to tell you look back. Just sing, girl. Sing. There is more to you than skin. Your grandmother was Nana, mountain strong. Struggling pan her piece of land, she plant her corn 1122 monks hard cockpit stone. Reap big ears. Her grater was sharp. Used to talk dry corn to flour. Needed for the trail. That long, hard journey carving out somewhere, just like we come here. We don't pay the dues, but don't think nobody owe you nothing. Is your barn land? Your navel string cut ya. So sing. Girl, sing, for there is more to you